Here we are with another LT1 10-speed Jeep. This one's relatively stock. It really hasn't been that modified. It drives great. It's a black Jeep and it's a hot day today and it's running pretty cool. Of course, I'd like to see that hoop removed. But overall, it's got some mild mods, you know, tire carrier and some bigger tires. But boy, when you get a stock Jeep like this with an LT1, you really feel the performance of this engine. Let's open this hood and take a quick look. By the way, check this winch out. Look how low it is. You could relocate that control box, but that's pretty good. This hoop here is not good though. That air is going to hit this and fly right up over the hood. Typical LT1 build. Interstate battery, wet lead acid, and we're going to talk about that here soon. Tipping's been turned. No hydraulics. Just a real simple, clean build. This morning we're in a late model JK with a LT1 10-speed as usual. Awesome combination. This Jeep drives awesome. It's got small tires and it's relatively stock, and they're just really fun to drive when they're this light. They're very nimble. The question is, can you afford one of these? And the answer is, I don't know. I started doing these engine conversions on Jeeps back in about 2008, 2009. Now, I had been doing engine conversions since the 1980s in all other platforms, but I started to specialize in the JK in the late 2000s. When we first started doing conversions in the 2009-2010 era, we started our conversion price off at $13,999. That was a total price, out the door. That would be for a 5.3 LS. Today, I can tell you that price is not quite double, but it's going to be over $20,000. I think these prices are utterly ridiculous. I think what this government has done with the supply chain and labor and everything else has squeezed consumers to the point that we're just thinking about necessities right now: food, clothing, and transportation. Now, a lot of us still have decent income, savings, whatever, that we can spend on a conversion. So what you have to weigh is, how much enjoyment will the conversion give you versus what it's going to cost. I can tell you I would not be happy driving my JK with a V6. In fact, I drove it for just a few months. I have a 2009 Rubicon, and the first trip I tried to take across the country, I was going to sell the vehicle. That's how bad the engine was for me. I love the JK platform. It's one of the very few full-frame live axle vehicles out. I think that is the most reliable setup off-road, and it gives you a lot of options. So for me, putting an LS in my JK was a no-brainer. Back then, we used to purchase brand new crate motors, and there was a ready supply of them. We used to buy the LC9 5.3s and the L94s and even the LS3s, sometimes 10, 20 at a time. But there was no supply shortage. The pricing was stable. If we had a 2 or 3 month lead time and we gave you an estimate, 3 months later the prices are going to be the same. Today we only give a 7-day estimate because we've had GM and other suppliers raise the prices overnight without warning, sometimes dramatically. So we can only guarantee a week in advance, and we understand what position they're in. With the supply chain issues, take the LS3 for example. While it is available, it's constantly on back order. GM says that their plants or suppliers that make parts are not delivering. Now, I can understand that during COVID, but in today's world, it doesn't matter what you look at, whether it's groceries, transportation, gasoline, housing, interest rates are high. Everything is just so expensive right now that it has to be passed on to the consumer. Having been around for a while and having a degree in business, I kind of understand a little bit about economics. And you have to think that the government knows this. In the last administration, everything was going down in price. The interest rates were super low. I refinanced my house at 2 point something or 3%. I remember during the Jimmy Carter era, the interest on a home loan got into the double digits, and on a vehicle it could be over 20%. That was disastrous. But I think Carter just really didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a Washington insider. I think the current administration does know what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. And what it comes down to is squeezing the consumer, squeezing their wallet for everything they can get, making everything more costly. In my opinion, reducing the supply chain for energy is disastrous because everything depends on energy. Whether it's transportation, food, engine conversions, we all count on energy. We're seeing our energy prices go up. Build a house, it's going to cost you more. Drive a car, it's going to cost you more. So here's the thing. 5 years ago, it was a very competitive market, and I guess it still is. You know, you got the Hemis out there, and you got the guys with the superchargers and whatever. And all of us are slaves to the economy. At Motec, we've always tried to keep the conversion affordable. We do our best. We shop around for engines. We shop around for transmissions. We give you the option of getting a low mileage or remanufactured units. And we've gone as far as we can go with that now. The days of having unlimited supplies of engines and transmissions and parts delivered to our door for a reasonable price are over. So guys, I don't know the exact prices. You can put a builder form in, but the LS 5.3, that's going to be a used engine, is going to start off in the $20,000 range. And when we quote you a price, it's the complete price. Unless we run into something, you know, like you have a lot of interferences or you want to add an axle or something like that. But we're not going to shortcut you. It's going to include a new SS fan, a new radiator, a new battery tray. We include a lot of stuff in our conversion that a lot of other engine companies don't. I've seen some Hemis and some other LS vehicles come through our shop, and they're running stock 3.8 radiators. There's been a lot less upgrades than we supply in our kit. So the LS 5.3 is going to start off in the low 20s. The LS 6.0 is probably going to be pushing the mid 20s. And don't quote me exactly, guys, because I haven't been doing the invoicing now for a while. One thing about the LS 6.0 is you do have the option of stepping up to a new one if you want a crate engine. The 5.3s, the crate engines are long gone. So if you want to run a new crate engine, expect the high 20s, I would say. When you look at the LS 6.2, it's a fabulous engine. I have one in my Jeep and I love it. Not only that, the LS 6.2 is compliant in California, so it should pretty much be compliant almost anywhere in the country. Obviously, the LS3 is the most popular engine. They are somewhat available. When I say that, we order them and sometimes we see them the next week. Sometimes we don't see them for months. The L9H and the L94, which are compliant in California, the prices have dramatically increased. I'm going to say the price on those engines have almost doubled in the last 5 or 6 years. And we're talking about going from new crate engines to used engines. I used to say low mileage because most of the engines that we purchased were under 30,000 miles. Now I'm going to say we're probably talking closer to 50 or 60,000 miles because that's all that's out there. But the LS 6.2 is one of my favorite engines, and if you get one used, it's still a great value because you're well over 400 horsepower. Those engines can easily go 250,000 miles. So if you get one with 40 or 50,000 miles, it's not the end of the world. You get a long way to go. In fact, I have an LS 6.2 L9H in my Rubicon now. It's just pushing over 100,000 miles. It doesn't burn a drop of oil. It's quiet. It's an awesome engine. The original Motec Jeep from 2008 with the LS 5.3 is still on the road. That engine has turned over 300,000 miles, and it still doesn't burn a drop of oil and runs perfect. So these engines have a long life and a lot of value if you take care of them. So I would not feel bad at all purchasing a used engine. Now, a lot of you guys want brand new. If you want brand new in the LS series, I'd probably say you're going to go with an LS3. If you want a California executive order build, then you're probably going to end up having to go with a low mileage engine. Now let's step into the LT. Fortunately, things get a little bit better with the LT because they're in current production. The LS went out of production in general in about 2015. Yes, there are some exceptions, like the LS 6.0 was made right up through 2020 in the production vehicles until the LAT came out. The LS3 has been offered by GM Performance for many years, but in general, the production LSs went out of production 5, 6, 7 years ago. The LT, because they are current production, are readily available. You can go to a wrecking yard and pick up LT 5.3s and 6.2s for pretty good prices, just like we used to on the LS 5.3 and 6.2. I think that's the best bang for your buck today. We do work with a couple of companies that supply us with low mileage engines, and we are able to get, now again, don't quote me, this is a generality, but I do believe the 5.3 LTs we get are under 30,000 miles, and the 6.2s are under 40,000 miles. So I think that's a great value. Now, if you want a new LT, of course the LT1 is available, and the price on that LT1 has gone way up. I don't know what it is right now. I think when we first started doing about 2016-17, they were costing about $7,900, $8,000. Then they went up to $9,000, and now I think they're pushing closer to $10,000 for a brand new LT1 crate engine. Every once in a while, we get a chance to buy auction GM engines. We bought a lot of the LT 5.3 L83s, and we used them all up. Then we bought the L82s, and we used those up. We bought a bunch of L86s and we used all those up. They pretty much fly out the door as fast as we can get them. So you're just going to have to check at the current time if we have any deals on those. Because when we get auctioned engines, what GM will do is when an engine is out of production or end of life and they come out with a new engine, like they go from the L86 to the L87, they'll auction those off to companies, and then we work with those companies to buy those engines. Now, in my opinion, is that engine better than the low mileage engine? You know, I get in these vehicles and I drive them and I can't tell the difference. The vendors we work with do check the engines thoroughly, and I can say that the failure rate on our used engines is extremely low. Most of the time, if we have an issue with a used engine, it's from shipping, like a valve cover got broken or a coil broke off or whatever while they were shipping it. But as far as the engines themselves go, they've been very solid. So currently with the LT, I think the best value is the low mileage 5.3 and 6.2. If you want to go new, go with an LT1. We're trying to get some new LT 5.3s. I think we are going to be able to get some L84s and L87s, and I want to talk about that a second. The L84 and the L87 is essentially the evolution of the L83 and the L86. They added stop-start, they added dynamic fuel management and some other technology. Well, I'm not 100% sure all that technology is sorted. We did an L87 build and it worked out excellent. But I have a customer, and I've been reading on the internet, guys have been having problems with the L87, and I do think it stems from part shortages. If you remember a while back, GM was shipping some of the 6.2 LTs without the cylinder displacement technology, without the stop-start, and from what I understand, it was just from parts shortage. They had to keep production going and they didn't have the parts. I'm even told GM outsourced some of the parts, like the lifters, from aftermarket suppliers, and that's coming back to bite them because there's a high recall rate on those. I have a customer who did a swap with us who has an L87 Denali, and that's exactly what happened to him. One of his lifters went bad, and the dealer told him that it was from the aftermarket supplier and that it's been an issue. Now, post-COVID, I think things are getting better, but we know that the L86 is solid. In fact, the same customer that has an L87 also has an L86 Denali, and he prefers it just because of the reliability and the fact that the L87 had those shortage problems. Now, they're going to sort that, and we're going to offer the L84 and 7. I drove an L84 rental truck. I think it was a U-Haul, and it ran excellent, and our L87 build ran excellent. So I have a lot of confidence in the motors. GM just had to sort everything out, and just like any other generation of engine, whether it were the LSs from 7 to 9 or the LTs from 14 to 16, I think they've got it sorted out. So the good news is the newer LT engines are going to have a better supply. A lot of you have probably been reading that Chrysler is dropping the Hemi in a lot of their platforms and going electric or going with a twin turbo straight six. But we are lucky and fortunate that GM is staying with the good old overhead valve V8, in my opinion. I drive them all, and I don't think you can beat the performance, the economy, the reliability, or the longevity of a V8. And I do like the Hemi. I just like the GM powertrain better. I've been a GM guy since I started doing automotive work, and that would have been over 40 years ago. And you know, guys, as time goes on, you get more mellow. I was always a GM guy, and always out there racing the Ford guys, and I always had a spot for Mopar, but Mopar was kind of like the third leg because, you know, it was really expensive to modify a Hemi, and if you had a 440, and I did, I had a 440 Roadrunner, not a six-pack. Yeah, I had a Roadrunner six-pack, but I had a Superbird 440 Magnum, 383 CUDA. I had a bunch of Mopar cars, and I loved them. Probably one of my favorite cars is my Challenger TA, the 340 six-pack, and I kept that car, and I still have it today. But the thing about the Chryslers was it was more expensive to modify. The parts weren't out there. Yeah, of course they were fast. I think cubic inch for cubic inch, they were probably more powerful than Ford and Chevy. But there just wasn't the support and the backup. With a small block Chevy, you could go anywhere. You could go into super shops or sometimes Walmart and buy parts for your Chevy engine. I remember going into the speed shops in Los Angeles back in the 70s and 80s, and whatever you wanted, a blower, intakes, carbs, it was all right there on the shelf. So I was always a GM guy, and I've always liked the GM powertrains. Now, I can't say that for the GM cars. I remember some of the shoddy work in the 70s and 80s, and that was kind of true across all the American manufacturers, but, you know, trim falling off and just the build quality lacked. But the powertrains were always good. What I liked about GM is they tried to take a minimalistic approach when it came to size, weight, and interchangeability. You can have a small block Chevy from 1962 or 1995 and probably a lot of the components will interchange. I mean, they had great parts interchangeability, parts were available, parts were cheap, and you can kind of say that about the LS. When the LS came out, it really was an advanced engine. It had new architecture, all aluminum construction, 6-bolt main. It almost doubled the horsepower. If you look at a 5.3 LS, it went to over 300 horsepower, where the older like K motors, which were bigger, they were 5.7 liters, were putting out 180, 190 horsepower. It really was a revolutionary step. So GM made this engine out of aluminum. They made it lightweight. They put an advanced cooling system in it, and that just spoke to me. It's begging to be put into a JK, because that's exactly what the JK needs. Now, when I started doing the LS conversions, there was guys doing the Hemi conversions, and I thought those were great too. I actually serviced Hemis, and we still do today. Living in Las Vegas, I saw a lot more overheating with the Hemis. They were heavier, so the vehicle dynamics and the weight on the suspension were different. The LS was just more compact, lighter. They were still powerful, and you had a pretty wide variety of LSs. You can get the lowly 4.8. You could get the monster LSA, or LS9, or LS7. It was a very diverse offering. And now Hemi was kind of diverse too, but most guys went with the old 5.7. The old 5.7 non-VVT Hemi with the 545 RFE was, you know, it was kind of marginal. I mean, of course it was monster better than the V6, but it was kind of dated. When they came out with the VVT and the WA580, it really brought the Hemi into the modern age for engine conversions. But again, it still didn't really compete with the LS. It was heavier. It had a 5-speed transmission instead of a 6. The GM 6-speed was advanced. It was clutch to clutch. Lighter construction, aluminum construction, cooled better. Dimensionally, it was smaller, so air could flow through the engine compartment better. I'm diverting from the discussion. The question is, can you afford an LS or an LT? Again, that's something you're going to have to decide. Here's what I would budget. If you're going to do the build yourself, let's say you go to a wrecking yard and you buy a 100,000 mile 5.3 for $2,500. You get a 6L80 for $2,000, and the price in the 6L80s have gone up way up too. So you're into the powertrain for $4,500. You're into our kit for $8 or $9 grand. I don't remember what it's running right now. I think it's $8,500 for the LS, which comes with most of everything you need. You're going to be into it for 12 to 13 grand minus the labor. I would say you can do a build for under 15,000 if you do it yourself. Do it right, buy the proper parts, you know, like Delco O2s. Don't shortcut the parts of the quality. You can pick up the 6-liter LSs for not much more than the 5.3. Now, if you're going to step up to a 6.2 LS or LT, you're going to have to increase your budget. I think to really do it right, you're probably going to be talking closer to 20 grand. That would be for a good quality, low mileage powertrain, and then all the other parts that you need to go along with it. If you want to do an in-house build with us, plan on the bare minimum being just over 20,000, and that's going to be for a low mileage powertrain with an LS 5.3, 6.0, not much more, but with all the whistles and bells, you're probably going to be talking from the low to mid 20s. Then if you want to go with a new engine like an LS3 or a 6-liter, you're going to be in the high 20s. If you want to go with an LT, the LT 5.3, unfortunately, most of the deals are gone. We were doing those for 20 grand. Now they're probably going to be in the high 20s, low 30s, depending on what you get. Meaning, if we get a new engine or new transmission, and that's a big nut right there. I didn't talk about the transmissions, but the price on transmissions has equally skyrocketed. And if you go with a new 10L80, it's going to be pushing over $6,000, between $6,000 and $7,000. Where if you go with a low mileage one, it's going to save you about $2,000. There's a lot of variables there, and you can put that into your builder form. But plan on the LT starting off in the high 20s and going to the high 30s, with the top of the line LT1 being in the high 30s and the LT 5.3 in the low 30s. In the low 30s when the engines are available new, and then the low mileage 5.3s and 6.2s, I think you can expect those to be in the mid to high 20s, which right now I think is the best deal, because you get the same performance as the new engines, you still get a warranty, and those engines are good for a lot of miles. So getting a 30 to 40,000 mile LT, in my opinion, is no big deal. The motor's broken in, and you're going to save yourself a bunch of money. So for a lot of us today, just being able to afford and fill up your JK and get groceries and send your kids to school has become a lot more expensive. So the guys at the shop want me to do a video on some builds, and we're going to do that in the near future here, not only for video instructions, but just to show everything that goes into these. During that process, I'm going to try to explain what value you can get out of one of these conversions, like where you can cut corners. I get guys that spend, I think, more money than they should. You know, like they'll go all out in an LT1 10-speed Atlas transfer case, 1410 shafts, and then the guy never goes off-road. He's a mall crawler. Really, you have to be realistic with what you want versus what you need, and you can save a ton of money and still have a great driving experience. So I'll try to do a couple of more of those videos upcoming. Right now we're gonna hit the trail in this late model JK. This thing is basically stock. They're awesome to drive like this because they're just so light and nimble, and they have so much power, but the LT is still very well mannered. It kind of feels like driving a, shall I say, a Corvette, a four-wheel drive Corvette, as far as the power delivery and the way it shifts and sounds. We'll see you guys soon.